Guten Abend.
Let's open with prayer.
Lasst uns mit Gebet anfangen.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
we thank you for this evening that we can come here again together.
wir danken dir für diesen Abend, dass wir hier wieder zusammenkommen können.
And we ask that you would be amongst us and send your Holy Spirit to help us understand.
Und wir bitten, dass du jetzt unter uns seist und deinen Heiligen Geist sendest, um uns zu helfen, zu verstehen.
That you would help us to pay attention and have open hearts.
Und auch hilf uns, aufmerksam zu sein und offene Herzen zu haben.
And that we would search for you with all our heart.
Und dass wir nach dir suchen werden mit unserem ganzen Herzen.
And I thank you and ask that you would please give us the promised golden oil in this evening.
Und ich danke dir und bitte, dass du uns die verheißene goldenes Öl geben wirst an diesem Abend.
In Jesus' name.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.
Okay. So, post the notes. David, can we
Ich habe die Notizen gepostet. Und das Deutsche folgt bald.
Okay. So this evening we want to look at this topic, what is the church?
So, heute Abend wollen wir diesen Thema anschauen. Was ist die Gemeinde?
And that's actually a broader topic than probably I can present this evening.
Und das ist vielleicht ein größeres Thema, als dass ich es heute Abend alleine zu decken konnte.
But just look at these illustrations and then see how far we get.
Aber wir schauen uns diese Darstellungen an und wie weit wir damit kommen werden.
Okay, so let's go to this first quote.
So, gehen wir in die Notizen zu diesem ersten Zitat.
And this is a quote that is many times quoted by, let's say, General Adventism.
Und das ist ein Zitat, der öfters benutzt wird von Adventismus an sich.
Or at least it's referred to I don't know if you have heard of, whether you have heard of it, where it says the ship will go through.
Oder es wird so benutzt, ich weiß nicht, ob ihr den Ausdruck mal gehört haben, das Schiff wird durchgehen.
Okay, so basically it's always said, the ship will go through, therefore we just need to remain seated. Okay.
Also
in the church.
der Schiff wird zwar durchgehen, deswegen brauchen wir nur unsere Sitzplätze einzunehmen.
Okay, so let's go to two quotes where this thought is conveyed by Sister White. Okay.
So schauen wir zwei Zitate an, wo diese Gedanke also angeschaut wird von Ellen White
Oder übermittelt wird.
oder übermittelt wird.
At least in the sense that the ship will go through. Okay.
Zumindest das, wo es sagt, wo der Schiff hindurchgehen wird.
Okay, let's read this first one
Der erste
from Special Testimonies.
ist von SPT.
And this actually speaks about the alpha apostasy by Kellogg.
Und da spricht über den Alpha-Abfall von Kellogg.
It says, shortly before I sent out the testimonies regarding the efforts of the enemy to undermine the foundation of our faith through the dissemination of seductive theories, I had read an incident about a ship in a fog meeting an iceberg. For several nights I slept but little. I seemed to be bowed down as a cart beneath sheaves. One night, a scene was clearly presented before me. A vessel was upon the waters, in a heavy fog. Suddenly, the lookout cried, "Iceberg, just ahead." There, towering high above the ship, was a gigantic iceberg. An authoritative voice cried out, "Meet it." There was not a moment's hesitation. It was a time for instant action. The engineer put on full steam and the man at the wheel steered the ship straight into the iceberg. With a crash, she struck the ice. There was a fearful shock and the iceberg broke into many pieces. falling with a noise like thunder to the deck. The passengers were violently shaken by the force of the collision, but no lives were lost. The vessel was injured, but not beyond repair. She rebounded from the contact, trembling from stem to stern, like a living creature. Then she moved forward on her way. Okay, so here we can see it's the ship illustrates the church that eventually go through, right?
Hier können wir sehen, diesen Schiff steht die Gemeinde, die letztes Endes durchgehen wird.
But there's another quote that is probably more likely this quote that many Adventists are referring to.
Aber
Okay.
es gibt ein anderes Zitat, das ist wahrscheinlich die Zitat, auf dem viele Adventisten beziehen.
And that says in the next quote from Echo,
Nächstes Zitat von B. Echo sagt:
the sincere believers of truth are often made sad, and their trials greatly increased by elements among them that annoy and dishearten them in their efforts. But there's no need of doubts and fears that the work of God will not succeed. God is at the head of the work, and He will set everything in order. Let us have faith that He's going to carry the noble ship which bears His people safely into port. Okay, so that basically says He will bring the ship into the port. Okay.
Es sagt da, dass er den Schiff ins Hafen bringen wird.
And therefore, many of our Adventist brethren, they make the application.
Deswegen viele von unseren Adventisten-Geschwister, sie machen die Anwendung.
And they say basically, okay, this now refers to the conference church. Okay.
Sie sagen, dies bezieht sich auf der Konferenzgemeinde.
And therefore, you just need to be in this ship, and you will arrive safely in the port.
Also deswegen musst du nur in diesem Schiff sein und wirst du sicher ans Hafen kommen.
Okay. But that's obviously a false application. Okay.
Aber das ist natürlich eine falsche Anwendung.
Okay, because we first need to identify what is the church, who's the church. Okay.
So, weil wir müssen zuerst feststellen, wer ist die Gemeinde, was ist die Gemeinde.
And obviously, Seventh-day Adventists, this is the Church of God. Okay.
Und natürlich 7-Tags-Adventisten, das ist die Gemeinde Gottes.
Yes, but it's not the institution or the conference institution of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay.
Aber es ist nicht der Konferenzinstitution der 7-Tags-Adventgemeinde.
It's not the institution, but it's the people. Okay.
Es ist nicht die Institution an sich, sondern das Volk.
Okay, and we will look at this closer.
Das werden wir näher anschauen.
So therefore, let's go to this next quote
So, gehen wir zu diesem nächsten Zitat.
under the heading "What is God's Church?"
Unter der Überschrift, was ist Gottes Gemeinde?
It says, "God has a church. It is not the great cathedral, neither it is the national establishment, neither is it the various denominations. It is the people who love God and keep His commandments." So, what is the church not, and what is the church?
So, was ist die Gemeinde nicht und was ist die Gemeinde?
It's not the building.
Yeah, it's not the building,
Es ist
right?
nicht die Gebäude
Or some institution, okay?
oder eine Institution,
But it's the
sondern
People.
it's the people.
es ist
Ja.
ein Volk.
It's the people that keep God's commandments,
Ein
right?
Volk, das Gottes Gebote einhalten.
Okay, and we have this false saying among the people or among God's people, okay?
Und wir haben diese falsche Aussage oder Ausdrucksweise unter Gottes Volk.
In the sense that we say, yeah, I go to the church, right?
In dem Sinne, ich sage, ich gehe zur Gemeinde.
But we mean we go to this building,
Was
okay?
wir damit meinen, wir sagen, wir gehen zu diesem Gebäude.
Okay, and that's actually a Catholic understanding,
Und
okay?
das ist eine katholische Verständnis.
And you go to an institution, to a building of an institution, and you call this a church, okay?
Du gehst zu einem Gebäude von einer Institution und nennst es Gemeinde.
Okay, but the church is actually the people that meet there, okay?
Aber die Gemeinde ist die Menschen, die sich dort versammeln.
And if you would meet at a different place, then the church would be there because the people are there, okay?
Und wenn du dich woanders treffen wirst, dann wäre die Gemeinde auch dort, denn die Gemeinde ist dort, wo die Menschen sich treffen.
And the building without people can never be the church, okay?
Und die Gebäude ohne den Menschen können niemals die Gemeinde sein.
Okay, so that's what she says here when we go on to read.
Und das ist, was sie hier sagt, wenn wir weiterlesen.
It says, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Where Christ is, even among the humble few, this is Christ's church. For the presence of the holy and for the presence of the high and holy one, who inhabiteth eternity, can alone constitute a church. So what makes up a church?
So, was macht eine Gemeinde aus?
What?
Presence of God.
The presence of Christ, right?
Gegenwärtigkeit von Christus.
Okay, and Christ is only present when?
Christus ist nur gegenwärtig, wann?
When 2 or 3 are gathered, they keep his commandments.
Yes,
Wenn
exactly.
2 oder 3 versammelt sind, die seine Gebote
And
einhalten,
that are together in His name,
die
right?
in seinem Namen versammelt sind.
Okay.
2 or 3 witnesses, that's what it's referring to. Because it's
2
the same
oder 3
principle.
Zeugen,
Mhm.
darauf bezieht sich, denn es ist derselbe Prinzip.
Because the 2 witnesses, Christ is in them.
Denn
That's
die
the-
2 Zeugen, Christus ist in sich.
Yes. In Christ's name is His
Christi Namen ist
His
sein
character, right?
Charakter.
Okay, and His character is depicted or displayed in His law. Okay.
Und sein Charakter wird dargestellt in sein Gesetz.
Okay, so if there are people gathering together that don't keep His commandments,
So, wenn es Menschen gibt, die zusammenkommen, sie seine Gebote nicht einhalten,
they don't represent His character,
sie seine Charakter nicht darstellen,
is Christ then among them?
ist Christus denn unter sich?
No.
Unter
No.
sie?
He's knocking to come in.
Yes.
Nein, er klopft, um hineinzukommen.
And are these people then in this sense His church?
Denn sind in diesem Sinne diesen Volk oder diese Menschen seine Gemeinde?
No, right?
Nein,
Not really.
nicht wirklich.
They can be, for instance, this is something we need to be also careful of, because the Bible uses the term church or God's people in 2 different ways. Okay.
Und da müssen wir vorsichtig sein, denn die Bibel benutzt Gemeinde oder Gottes Volk in 2 verschiedene Arten.
Let's look at this.
Lass uns das anschauen.
Let's go to Romans chapter 9.
Gehen wir zu Römer Kapitel 9.
Romans 9 verse 6 to 9.
Römer 9, die Versen 6 bis 9.
It says, "Not as though the word of God hath taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel." So, what does he say here?
So, was sagt er hier in Vers 6?
Just because you're in Israel doesn't mean that you're part of Israel.
Yes.
So, nur weil du in Israel bist, heißt nicht, dass du Teil von Israel bist.
Just because you're literally an Israelite doesn't mean that you're an Israelite of God. Okay.
Nur weil du buchstäblich eine Israeliter bist, heißt nicht, dass du eine Israelite Gottes bist.
Because it says in verse 7,
Denn es sagt in Vers 7,
"Neither because they are the seed of Abraham, literally, are they all children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, they are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. For this is the word of promise, at this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son."
das ist Vers 9.
Okay, so therefore there are 2 types of Israelites, he says here. Right?
Deswegen, es gibt 2 Arten von Israeliten, wie es hier sagt.
One type is after the flesh, and the other type is after the spirit. Right?
Die eine Sorte ist nach dem Fleische, der andere nach dem Geiste.
And he basically says that those after the flesh, they are not really Israelites. Okay.
Und er sagt hier, diejenigen, die nach dem Fleische sind, sind nicht wirklich Israeliten.
Okay, but so basically only those after the spirit are really the church of God, right?
So, nur diejenigen, die nach dem Geiste sind, sind wirklich die Gemeinde Gottes.
Okay, but at the same time,
Aber zur selben Zeit,
in the Bible speaks about oftentimes Israel as a whole, right?
die Bibel spricht über Israel als ein Gesamtes,
Ja, als Gesamtheit.
in Gesamtheit.
Yeah. So where the Bible doesn't differentiate between those of the flesh or those of the spirit, right?
Die Bibel unterscheidet nicht zwischen diejenigen von Fleisch und diejenigen von Geist.
Okay, but on other scriptures it differentiated.
Aber in anderen Schriftstellen, es macht wohl einen
The
Unterschied.
point is, God has a denominated people, right?
So, Gott hat einem denominierten Volk.
And this is saying just because you're part of that denominated people doesn't mean that you're the true Israel.
Ja.
Und das hier sagt, nur weil du ein Teil von diesem denominierten Volk bist, heißt nicht, dass du ein Teil des wahren Israels bist.
But the Bible says first the church and then the world. So he's speaking about first the denominated people.
Yes.
Wenn die Bibel sagt zuerst die Gemeinde und dann die Welt, er spricht zuerst seine denominierten Volk.
Because he says amongst his denominated people there's always a remnant.
Denn unter diesem denominierten Volk, es gibt einen Überrest.
Because if there was no remnant, he would have cast them off.
Denn wenn es keinen Überrest gäbe, er hätte sie längst verworfen.
Yes. Maybe we can just illustrate this, right?
Dann können wir das darstellen.
So all this are his denominated people,
So, dies hier ist seinem denominierten Volk.
and let's say this portion here
Und dieses Teil hier
would be the true ones among his denominated.
wäre dem Wahren unter den Denominierten.
Okay, so and this is really his church. Okay,
Und das ist wahrlich seine Gemeinde.
okay, but let's continue, and I hope we'll get clearer as we go along.
So, lesen wir weiter und ich hoffe, es wird klarer, als wir so rangehen.
So let's go back to this quote that we
Jetzt
just
müssen
read.
Zitat zurück, die wir gerade gelesen haben.
So we read that it's only where Christ is, there his church is,
So, wir
right?
haben gelesen, dass es nur wo Christus ist, da ist seine Gemeinde.
And he's only with them that keep his commandments.
Und er ist nur mit diejenigen, die seine Gebote einhalten.
Okay, let's continue.
Lesen wir weiter.
It says, where 2 or 3 are present who love and obey the commandments of God, Jesus there presides. Let it be in the desolate place of the earth, in the wilderness, in the city, or enclosed in prison walls. So it has nothing to do with any building, yes?
So, es hat nichts mit einem Gebäude zu tun.
The glory of God has penetrated the prison walls, flooding with glorious beams of heavenly light the darkest dungeon. His saints may suffer, but their sufferings will, like the apostles of old, spread their faith and win souls to Christ and glorify his holy name. The bitterest opposition expressed by those who hate God's great moral standard of righteousness should not and will not shake the steadfast soul who trusts fully in God. Okay, now let's go to the 1 Timothy,
Gehen wir jetzt zu 1. Timotheus,
chapter 3, verse 14 to 15.
Kapitel 3, Verse 14 und 15.
It says, These things write I unto thee, hoping to come unto thee shortly. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. Okay, so what is this church?
So, was ist seine Gemeinde?
The pillar and ground of the truth.
Die
Okay.
Säule und Fundament der Wahrheit.
Okay, so when there's not the truth, this is not his church.
So,
Okay.
wo die Wahrheit nicht ist, das ist nicht seine Gemeinde.
Okay. Now let's continue.
Lesen wir weiter.
Next quote
Nächster Zitat.
under the heading "Unobscure People."
Unter den Überschrift ein verborgenes Volk.
And this speaks now about the Sunday law time period here.
Er spricht
Okay.
über den Sonntagsgesetzzeitperiode.
It says, "I saw the nominal church in nominal Adventists, like Judas, would betray us to the Catholics to obtain their influence to come against the truth. The saints then will be an obscure people, little known to the Catholics." So you have now the nominal churches and nominal Adventists, right?
Also, du hast Namensgemeinden und Namensadventisten.
And what do?
Und was tun sie?
They come against the saints.
Yeah, they come against the saints, right?
So, sie heben sich gegen den Heiligen an.
Okay. And the saints, they are little known to the Catholics, right?
Und die Heiligen sind unbekannt, also wenig bekannt zu den
They're not an
Katholiken.
organized church full of 18 million people.
Yes,
They're a
exactly.
very small group
Die
of
sind
people.
nicht eine organisierte Gemeinde mit 18 Millionen Menschen drin, sondern eine sehr kleine verborgene Gruppe.
And because this would not be true of the conference churches, right?
Also das werde nicht die Wahrheit sein von den Konferenzgemeinden.
Because the conference churches is well known to the Catholics.
Denn die Konferenzgemeinden sind wohlbekannt zu den Katholiken.
Okay. So it goes on to say,
Sagt weiter.
but the churches and nominal Adventists who know of our faith and customs, for they hated us on account of the Sabbath, for they could not refute it, will betray the saints and report them to the Catholics as those who disregard the institutions of the people. That is, that they keep the Sabbath and disregard Sunday. Alright, so why do they want to deliver the saints up?
So, warum wollen sie den Heiligen ausliefern?
Because they reprove them over the Sabbath.
Yes.
Weil sie
Okay.
den Sabbat wegen tadeln.
So, and they cannot refute it.
Und sie können es nicht widersprechen.
Okay, and then they say, look, these guys, they keep the Sabbath and they break the Sunday.
Dann
Okay.
sagen sie, schaut, diese Leute hier, sie halten Sabbat und brechen Sonntag.
So how can they only say this?
So, wie können sie nur das sagen?
If they
Because they
rejected
don't.
the Sabbath.
Exactly.
So the
Wenn sie
commandment-
selber den Sabbat verworfen
Ja.
haben.
Because otherwise they would deliver themselves up at the same time, right?
Andersrum werden sie sich selbst zur selben Zeit ausliefern.
So they do not longer keep the Sabbath and they now point to the remnant, the saints that still keep the Sabbath.
So, sie halten den Sabbat nicht mehr und sie weisen auf den Heiligen, die den Sabbat wohl noch halten.
Okay, so therefore we can see already that when the Sunday law comes, the conference churches will not remain true to God. Okay?
Wir können bereits sehen, dass wenn der Sonntagsgesetz kommt, also die Konferenzgemeinden werden Gott nicht treu bleiben.
And they will accept the Sunday.
Sie werden
Okay.
Sonntag annehmen.
Okay, but all those that don't accept the Sunday, they will be these little obscure people. Okay?
All diejenigen, die Sonntag nicht annehmen, die werden diesen kleinen, verborgenes Volk sein.
Okay, but when we go on to the next quote,
Aber wenn wir jetzt zum nächsten Zitat gehen,
it says here about the angel of Revelation 18.
spricht über den Engel von Offenbarung 18.
It says, the angel who unites in the proclamation of the third angel's message is to lighten the whole earth with his glory. So it speaks about the angel of Revelation 18, right?
Spricht über den Engel von Offenbarung 18.
A work of worldwide extent and unwanted power is here foretold. The Advent movement of 1840 to 44 was a glorious manifestation of the power of God. The first angel's message was carried to every missionary station in the world. And in some countries there was the greatest religious interest which has been witnessed in any land since the Reformation of the 16th century. But these are to be exceeded by the mighty movement under the last warning of the third angel. Okay, so where on our line do we mark Revelation 18?
So, wo auf unserer Linie markieren wir Offenbarung 18?
Written there, right?
Siebte Plage.
Okay,
Das ist sogar da geschrieben.
begins here and we'll just go forward here. Okay.
Es fängt hier an und geht vorwärts.
But before this mighty movement here begins,
Aber bevor diese mächtige Bewegung anfängt,
you're an obscure people,
du
right?
bist ein verborgenes Volk.
Okay. And it says here now, what are you when the Revelation 18 begins?
Es sagt hier, was bist du, wenn Offenbarung 18
Or what does
anfängt?
it illustrate?
Oder was stellt es
The
da?
angel of Revelation 18.
Was stellt dieser Engel von Offenbarung 18 dar?
Mighty movement.
Yeah, a mighty movement.
Eine
Okay.
mächtige Bewegung.
So it's a movement.
Es ist
Okay.
eine Bewegung.
So it won't be an organized institution. Okay.
Es wird nicht eine organisierte Institution.
Okay. So here in this time, the saints will be an obscure people, little known to the Catholics, right?
Hier in dieser Zeit, die Heiligen werden
Until here.
ein verborgenes Volk, also wenig bekannt zu den Katholiken,
Actually, until here.
bis zu
Okay.
diesem Punkt.
Because here, then you will be reported, right?
Es ist hier, wo du gemeldet wirst.
Now you will come into the awareness of them.
Jetzt wirst du in ihre Aufmerksamkeit gebracht.
Now you must give the faithful testimony,
Jetzt
right?
musst du eine treue Zeugnis ablegen.
Then they will put you to death,
Dann
right?
werden sie dir den Tod überliefern.
And all those that get saved out of it,
Und all diejenigen, die daraus gerettet werden,
they will then be this beginning of this mighty movement, right?
sie werden den Anfang dieser mächtigen Bewegung werden.
That's what Sister White refers to in Ezekiel 28, the light bearer that begins as a movement and warns about how it's going to
Mhm.
turn later.
Yes.
Das ist, was Ellen White spricht in Hesekiel 28, diese Lichtträger, die eine mächtige Bewegung wird und viele zur Licht führen wird.
and then falls away later.
und dann später wegfällt.
Yes. And that would be Ezekiel 28,
Das
right?
wäre Hesekiel 28.
Okay. So now let's go to this next quote. It's also a familiar quote.
Dann gehen wir zu diesem nächsten Zitat, auch ein wohlbekannten Zitat.
So therefore, what we could see basically in the Sunday law time period, you have this basically this underground church. Okay.
So, was wir sehen konnten in der Sonntagsgesetz-Zeitperiode, du hast diese Partisanenkirche, also Untergrundgemeinde,
That get delivered up and reported here. Okay.
die ausgeliefert, hier gemeldet werden.
Then it comes in public awareness.
Dann
Okay.
wird es in die öffentliche Aufmerksamkeit gebracht.
Will be menaced and denounced as the greatest terrorists and troublemakers, right?
Es wird so heruntergesprochen als Terroristen und Trübler sein.
Unruhestifter. Yeah.
Und Ruhestifter, Trübler.
In order that they have a justification to put you to death. Okay.
Sodass sie denn rechtfertigen können, dich den Tod überzugeben.
And then when you're faithful, then you will be delivered here and this mighty movement can begin. Okay.
Wenn du treu wirst in dieser Zeit, dann wirst du Teil dieser großen Bewegung sein.
Okay. So therefore we can see who the true church will be here in the Sunday law time periods. Okay.
Dann können wir sehen, wer der wahre Gemeinde sein wird in diesen Sonntagsgesetz-Krise.
Okay, it won't be this official conference church.
Es wird nicht diese offizielle Konferenzgemeinde.
Okay. Because also, what would this be in the pioneer time?
Denn auch was wäre denn das hier sein zur Zeit der Pioniere?
1848, right?
1848.
And what happened in 1848?
Und was geschah dann?
First day.
Yeah, there came were the first day Adventists that opposed the
Der ersten Tags
seventh day Adventists. Right?
Adventisten haben den Siebentags-Adventisten widerstanden.
Okay, so the first day Adventists would be those Adventists that now accept the Sunday,
Und
right?
der erste Tags-Adventisten wäre denn diejenigen, die Sonntag annehmen.
Okay, and they were back then the great majority of Adventists.
Und
Okay.
damals war es der Mehrzahl von den Adventisten.
Okay, now let's go to this next quote.
Gehen wir zu diesem nächsten Zitat.
Under the heading A New Organization.
Unter der Überschrift eine neue Organisation.
Says the enemy of souls has sought to bring in the supposition that a great reformation was to take place among Seventh-day Adventists, and that this reformation would consist in giving up the doctrines which stand as the pillars of our faith, and engaging in a process of reorganization. Were this reformation to take place, what would result? So who wants to make a reformation among Adventism?
So, wer möchte eine Reformation unter den Adventisten machen?
Satan, right?
Satan.
Okay. So, and it's a process of reorganization, it says,
Das
yes?
ist ein Prozess der Reorganisation.
And giving up the doctrines that are the pillars of our faith.
Die Lehren aufgeben, die die Säulen unseres Glaubens sind.
Okay. And what would be the result, she asks. Okay.
Und sie stellt die Frage hier, was wäre denn das Ergebnis?
It says the principles of truth that God in His wisdom has given to the remnant church would be discarded. Our religion would be changed. The fundamental principles that have sustained the work for the last 50 years would be accounted as error. A new organization would be established. Books of a new order would be written. A system of intellectual philosophy would be introduced. The founders of this system would go into the cities and do a wonderful work. Okay, so when this reorganization takes place,
Also wenn diese Reorganisation stattfindet,
what is the result of it?
was wäre das Ergebnis?
New doctrines.
Okay, yes, new doctrines.
Neue Lehren werden entstehen.
Yes, but it says here a new organization would be established, right?
Eine neue Organisation wird etabliert.
Okay, so they will still have the name Seventh-day Adventism.
Sie werden
Okay.
immer noch den Namen Siebentags-Adventisten tragen.
Before, right?
Mhm.
That's what.
One thing. Yeah, so they still have the name Seventh-day Adventism. Okay,
Sie haben immer noch den Namen Adventisten.
but the content of Adventism is now changed.
Und
Okay.
der Inhalt von das, was Adventisten ausmachen, werden sie ändern.
Okay, just to give you a practical example. Okay.
Ein praktisches Beispiel davon zu
At
geben,
least we here in Austria can refer to it. Okay.
zumindest wir hier in Österreich Bezug nehmen können.
I don't know when it was, but some years ago,
So vor einigen Jahren, ich weiß nicht genau wann,
and before we moved down here to Austria.
noch bevor wir hier nach Österreich kamen.
Yeah, the discounter Aldi bought Hofer. Okay.
Also der Supermarkt Aldi-Gruppe hat Hofer gekauft.
Okay. But they didn't change the name here in Austria from Hofer to Aldi, even though they now controlled it.
Sie
Okay.
haben aber die Namen Hofer nicht nach Aldi verändert hier in Österreich, obwohl sie den Besitzern waren.
Okay. But they kept the name. Okay.
Sie
But
haben aber den Namen behalten,
they changed the business model. Okay.
aber das ganze Geschäftsmodell haben sie verändert.
Okay. In order that now it basically looks like or similar to Aldi. Okay.
So, es sieht so ähnlich aus wie Aldi,
But it has the name Hofer on it.
aber
Okay.
trägt den Namen Hofer.
Okay. In the same way, Adventism has been hijacked. Okay.
So, auf derselbe Weise ist der Adventismus gehijackt geworden.
Yeah.
Looks like
So,
apostate Protestant.
It still has the name of Seventh-day Adventism. Okay.
Es trägt immer noch den Namen Siebten-Tags-Adventisten,
But the business model is like apostate Protestantism.
aber das Geschäftsmodell ist eher die des abgefallenen Protestantismus.
Okay. And this is what people don't realize. Okay.
Das ist, was die Menschen nicht wahrnehmen.
And that's why they still cling to the brand name, let's say. Okay.
Und deswegen halten sie immer noch zu dem Markennamen,
Yeah. But they don't realize that the content is actually apostate Protestantism.
verstehen aber nicht, dass der Inhalt ist der abgefallene Protestantismus.
And what we read in Timothy is the church is the ground and pillar of the truth.
Was wir
Okay.
in Timotheus gelesen haben, ist, die Gemeinde ist die Säule und die Fundament der Wahrheit.
So it's not about the name, but it's about the content of
Also
it.
es handelt sich nicht über den Namen, sondern eher der Inhalt.
It's not about being baptized into this church, but being baptized into the truth. Okay.
Es handelt sich nicht darüber, in die Gemeinde hineingetauft zu werden, sondern eher in die Wahrheit hineingetauft zu sein.
And this is also what she says in the next quote when we go there.
Und wenn wir zur nächsten Zitat gehen,
Yes, we
das
come
sagt
back.
sie auch hier.
So let's read this next quote.
Dann lesen wir diesen nächsten Zitat.
It says, and it's enough to just read down to the bold-faced part.
Und wir lesen bis zum Fettgedruckten.
It says, many will honestly search the word for light, as those in the past have searched it, and they see the light in the word. But they did not pass over the ground in their experience when these messages of warning were first proclaimed. Not having had this experience, some do not appreciate the value of the truths that have been to us as waymarks, and that have made us a peculiar people what we are. So what made them a peculiar people?
So, was hat sie eine besonderen Volk gemacht?
Experience that they went through in order to obtain that.
Also die Erfahrung, die sie hindurchgegangen sind, um
Not
das zu
having had
erreichen.
this experience, some do not appreciate the value,
The value of what?
the truth.
Yeah. So it's the truth that make them peculiar people.
So, es ist
Okay.
die Wahrheit, der sie eine besondere Volk macht.
And the truth gave them an experience and gave them the waymarks.
Die
Okay.
Wahrheit hat sie eine Erfahrung gegeben, hat sie die
But
Wegmarken
I
gegeben.
think here it's referring to the experience that they had obtaining
Mhm.
that truth, because it says they're searching the word for light as those in the past have searched it, and they see all the truths that these people found, but they didn't go
Experience.
through the experience that they went through in order to obtain that.
Genau.
Therefore, they don't value it.
Yes.
It's like some people.
Can I just say more? Sorry. Also die sehen die Wahrheit, die diesen Leute haben, aber die haben denen fehlt die Erfahrung, die diesen Leuten gehabt haben, um diesen Wahrheiten herauszuarbeiten. Deswegen schätzen sie die Wahrheiten nicht ein.
It's like when you're given something, you didn't work for it.
Es ist wie, als wenn du irgendetwas gegeben wird, du hast aber dafür nichts
You
getan.
never appreciate that thing as much as when you worked for it and paid for it yourself.
Du wirst das Ding nie wertschätzen auf derselbe Weise, als wenn du dafür gearbeitet hast und selber bezahlt hast.
And these people here don't, they think that they understand the truth, but they don't really understand all the peculiarities of how that truth was formed and how it became this solid platform.
Und diesen hier von der Rede ist, sie meinen die Wahrheit zu verstehen, aber die verstehen nicht die ganzen Einzelheiten und die Erfahrung, wie diese Wahrheiten formiert waren und zustande gekommen sind.
So they apply their own ideas to these things.
Also sie fügen ihre eigenen Ideen dazu.
Yes, I mean, I agree with this, but when we just read this bold-faced sentence again,
Aber wenn wir diesen
very
fettgedruckten Satz lesen,
slowly, okay, then we can see that it's the truth that made them peculiar people. Okay,
wir können sehen, dass die Wahrheit ist, der sie eine besondere Volk gemacht
and I
hat.
agree that she puts it in the context of those people. They don't value these truths, but it was the truth that made them this peculiar people. Okay, because it says here, not having had this experience, some do not appreciate the value of the truths that have been to us as waymarks. So the truths have been as waymarks, and that the truth have made us as a people, as a peculiar people, what we are. Okay? Because it's always the truth that makes you something different from somebody else, right?
Es ist immer die Wahrheit, der dich anders macht als jemand anders. Lawrence, in the first
Yeah,
The second
you're
sentence.
that wrong, but it doesn't
Like-
matter, I'm not going to argue with you.
it says, many will honestly search for the word of light as those who have passed have searched it. So speaking about those who've gone through the experience. And they see the light in the word. So they have the truth. But they did not pass over the ground in their experience.
No, that's a wrong expression. It doesn't mean that they have the truth.
They see the
They
truth.
see the points that they are illustrating.
Yes.
It says,
But not having had this experience, they don't appreciate the truth.
Yes. Okay, but she still says the point she wants to make is that it's the truth that makes you a peculiar people. Okay, because just take it as an easy example. Okay, what differentiates you from a Catholic, let's say?
So, was macht einen Unterschied zwischen dir und einem Katholik?
Yeah, the doctrine, right?
Also die Lehre.
So it's these different women. Okay.
Also diese verschiedenen Frauen.
just hold on that once. When you go to 1 Corinthians 13, right, it explains this point that it's talking about here.
Wenn du zu 1. Korinther 13 gehst,
I mean, I agree with you, it's about the truth, but it's also about the experience that you had to obtain that truth, because this is what it speaks about in 1 Corinthians 13, right? It says, because in verse 2, it says,
Vers 2,
though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries, and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could move mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. So, see, you can sit in a class and you can mentally receive the truth.
du kannst in einer Klasse
Exactly from
sitzen,
other people, but you'll never appreciate it unless you have the experience that they went
kannst-
through in order to obtain it.
in einer Klasse sitzen und geistig die Wahrheit erhalten und verstehen, aber du wirst diese Wahrheit nie schätzen lernen, wie die Menschen, die die Erfahrung hindurchgegangen sind, um diesen Wahrheiten zu erhalten.
Because truth, and I agree with what you're saying, but maybe it's just the way you're saying it, but truth alone won't save you. It's the truth through an experience received into your heart that saves you.
Die Wahrheit alleine wird dich nicht retten, sondern es ist die Wahrheit, die durch Erfahrung in deinem Herzen hineingedrungen hast, der dich retten wird.
Okay, because that's what 1 Corinthians says, you can have all the truth, but it doesn't make you saved unless you regenerate your
Und
heart.
das ist, was 1. Korinther sagt, du kannst alle Wahrheiten haben, aber es wird dich nicht retten, es sei denn, dass es dein Herz verändert.
But it doesn't matter. I agree that what you're saying is about the truth, but it's just about what that means, that's all.
So the point I want to make is it's always the truth, right? The church is the ground and pillar of the truth. That's what we read. Right?
Wir haben gelesen, dass die Gemeinde ist die Fundament und Säule der Wahrheit.
And it's therefore, for instance, you can just look at it. Before 1789, or even before 1840, okay,
Also sogar bevor 1840,
okay, except maybe Miller, okay, there were no Adventists, okay,
außer Miller vielleicht, es gab keine Adventisten.
okay, but then suddenly Adventists came along, right?
Und dann plötzlich sind die Adventisten entstanden.
How about? Yeah.
So, wie kam das?
It's because now the doctrine, the unfolding of God's word, and they now believe this new light, and they therefore believed in the advent of Christ. Right?
Das war diese Lehre, diese neue Licht und deswegen glaubten sie an den Wiederkunft Christi.
And because they accepted this doctrine, they became Adventists.
Und weil sie
Okay.
diese Lehre annahmen, sie sind Adventisten geworden.
Yes. What differentiates a Baptist from a Methodist?
Was ist es, was ein Baptist von einem Methodist unterscheidet?
It's their doctrine, right?
Das ist deren Lehre.
A Catholic from a Jehovah's Witness. Okay,
Ein Katholik von einer Jehovas Zeuge.
it's the doctrine. Okay,
Das ist die Lehre.
and that's what it says in the Bible. It's all these different women that are these different doctrines. Right?
Und das ist, was es in die Bibel sagt. All diese verschiedenen Frauen sind all diese verschiedenen Lehren.
Okay, so therefore, what makes us Adventists is not the name; it's the doctrine.
Also
Okay.
deswegen das, was uns Adventisten ausmacht, ist nicht der Name, sondern die Lehre.
If you believe the Adventist doctrine, then you're an Adventist.
Wenn
Okay.
du die Adventist-Lehre glaubst, dann bist du ein Adventist.
Yeah. If you just profess to be an Adventist, but you don't believe the Adventist doctrine, you're not an Adventist in God's
Wenn
eyes.
du bekennst, ein Adventist zu sein, du aber glaubst nicht an die Lehre, in Gottes Augen bist du kein Adventist.
If you can't prove what you believe, then you don't believe it.
Also wenn du nicht beweisen kannst, was du glaubst, dann glaubst du es nicht wirklich.
Okay, so and therefore, what we read in the quote above in 1 SN 204,
So, deswegen, was wir in der Zitat darüber gelesen haben, 1 SM 204,
and let's just go back there and let's read this again.
dann lesen wir das nochmal.
It says, the enemy of souls has sought to bring in the supposition that a great reformation was to take place among Seventh-day Adventists, and that this reformation would consist in giving up the doctrines or the truths, right, which stand as the pillars of our faith, and engaging in a process of reorganization. Were this reformation to take place, what would result? The principles of truth that God in His wisdom has given to the remnant church would be discarded. Our religion would be changed. The fundamental principles that have sustained the work for the last 50 years would be accounted as error. A new organization would be established. Okay, so therefore you can see the truth would be rejected, right?
Deswegen können wir sehen, die Wahrheit wird verworfen.
So therefore you only have the outward package, the name, but you don't have the content anymore. Okay.
Deswegen hast du nur der äußere Schein, also das Name nur, aber das Inhalt hast du nicht.
Okay, and that's why that's a problem. Yes.
Und das ist ein Problem.
So if you remain in this ship, you have a problem.
Wenn du in
Yes?
diesem Schiff bleibst, dann hast du ein Problem.
Okay, because this ship will not go through.
Weil dieses Schiff wird nicht hindurchgehen.
Because let's just read what will happen to this ship.
Lass uns lesen, was mit diesem Schiff geschehen wird.
It says, so a new organization would be established, books of a new order would be written, a system of intellectual philosophy would be introduced. The founders of this system would go into the cities and do a wonderful work. The Sabbath, of course, would be lightly regarded, as also the God who created it. Nothing would be allowed to stand in the way of the new movement. The leaders would teach that virtue is better than vice, but God being removed, they would place their dependence on human power, which, without God, is worthless. Their foundation would be built on the sand, and storm and tempest would sweep away the structure.
Matthew 7.
Yes. So what happened to them?
So, was geschah mit sie?
This ship will sink, right?
Dieses Schiff wird sinken.
Okay. So therefore, it's very easy to see that this application of the ship will go through is wrong to apply to the conference church.
Also
Okay.
deswegen ist es sehr einfach zu sehen, dass diese Anwendung, dass der Schiff hindurchgehen wird, wäre falsch, das der Konferenzgemeinde anzuwenden.
Yes. Okay. You also want to make a point earlier?
No, I was just on this point of Isaiah 4 and verse 1. Just confirms this point.
Jesaja 4,
Let's go to Isaiah 4, verse 1.
Vers 1.
This is this Hofer Aldi illustration.
Das ist diese Höfer Aldi Darstellung.
It says, and in that day 7 women, meaning all the churches,
So 7 Frauen bedeutet alle Gemeinden,
shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread, that means we will keep all our own doctrines,
unsere eigenen Brot zu essen, wir bewahren oder behalten unsere eigenen Lehren,
or our own identities, if you want to say.
Oder unsere eigenen Identitäten, wenn man so
And
sagt.
wear our own apparel, self-righteousness.
Unsere eigenen Kleider tragen, dass sie selbstgerecht bleiben.
Only let us be called by thy name to take away our reproach. So they want to keep their, want to remain Seventh-day Adventist and Baptist and all this other thing, but they want to receive of this mark, right, in order that they don't get persecuted.
So, sie wollen
The number
zwar
of his name, 666.
diese verschiedenen Gemeinden bleiben, also Siebentagsadventisten, Baptisten, Methodisten und so weiter, nur seinen Namen tragen, damit, oder die erhalten den Malzeichen des Tieres, damit sie nicht verfolgt werden.
So they're all Catholic, but they have this, they keep their original identities to some degree.
Also die sind alle Katholiken
Yes.
von Inhalt her, aber äußerlich halten sie ihre eigenen Identitäten.
Yes, so they also just name only. Right?
Die
Yes,
sind
I'm
nur
only-
namens nur.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Okay. So now let's go back to our notes
Und zu den Notizen zurück.
and let's read this next quote here from 5MR.
Nehmen wir den nächsten Zitat von 5MR.
Because we saw in the quote earlier that Satan's reformation would be to get rid of the truth that sustained the work for the past 50 years, she said.
Und wir
Right?
haben gesehen, dass Satans Absicht wäre, die Wahrheit, seine Reformation wäre die Wahrheit, die uns für die letzten 50 Jahre bewahrt haben, wegtun würde oder wegschaffen möchte.
Yes. And she wrote this in, I don't know, 1890 something. Okay.
Und sie hat das in etwa 1890 irgendwas geschrieben.
Or beginning of the 1900s, I cannot tell exactly.
Oder Anfang des 20. Jahrhunderts, ich weiß nicht genau.
But 50 years back would bring you to the early pioneer time period. Okay.
Vor 50 Jahren, das wäre zu den frühen Pionierenzeit bringen.
And when was this chart here published?
Und wann war diese Karte gedruckt oder veröffentlicht?
1850. Right?
1850.
Okay, so let's go now to this next quote here.
So gehen wir zu diesem nächsten Zitat.
It says, God showed me the necessity of getting out a chart. I saw it was needed and that the truth made plain upon tables would affect much and would cause souls to come to the knowledge of the truth. Okay, so this chart would bring people to where?
So diese Karte werden die Menschen zu was bringen?
Knowledge of the truth. Okay.
Kenntnis der Wahrheit.
So when they get to the truth, they can become part of the church.
Und
Right?
wenn sie die Wahrheit erhalten, dann können sie Teil der Gemeinde werden.
Okay, next quote.
Nächster Zitat.
On our return to Brother Nichols, and it was Brother Nichols here that published this chart.
Und es war Bruder Nichols, der diese 1850er Karte erstellt hat.
On our return to Brother Nichols, the Lord gave me a vision and showed me that the truth must be made plain upon tables, and it would cause many to decide for the truth by the third angel's message, with the two former being made plain upon tables. Okay, so what would be made plain upon the tables here?
So, was wird klar hier auf Tafeln erstellt?
The truth.
The truth.
Die Wahrheit.
Okay, so therefore, this was the truth that the Lord gave to place His church upon, right?
So, deswegen, dies war der Wahrheit, die der Herr gab, um seine Gemeinde auszustellen.
Yes, and Satan, he tried to get rid of it.
Und
Okay,
Satan versuchte es wegzuraffen.
and nowadays he achieved it. Yes,
Heutzutage hat er gute Arbeit geleistet.
and therefore, the church, the official church, is not built anymore upon the truth.
Und
Okay,
deswegen die Gemeinde, also die offizielle Gemeinde, ist nicht mehr auf diese Wahrheit gebaut.
just shows that they just have a name.
Es
Okay,
zeigt, dass sie namenslos sind.
but they are a new organization.
Und die sind eine neue Organisation.
But inside this new organization, there are many true believing Seventh-day Adventists.
Aber
Okay?
innerhalb von dieser Organisation, es gibt viele wahre herzensgläubige Adventisten.
That just follow the best light they have. Okay?
Sie folgen das beste Licht, die sie haben.
Yeah, but God wants to get them out of this organization. Okay?
Und der Herr möchte sie aus dieser Organisation herausbringen.
Yeah. And want to make a movement in these last days. Okay?
Um in diesen letzten Tagen eine Bewegung zu erstellen.
Okay. With true Adventists that are the church based upon the doctrine and not based upon an institution.
Mit
Okay.
wahren Adventisten, deren Glaube auf die Lehre gebaut ist und nicht auf den Namen.
For instance, I got disfellowshipped out of the official SDA church, okay?
Zum Beispiel, ich bin herausgeschmissen worden aus der Namens-Adventist-Gemeinde,
Conference churches, okay?
die Konferenzgemeinde.
Why?
Warum?
Because I believe this truth,
Weil
okay?
ich diese Wahrheit geglaubt
The
habe.
truth that the Lord said should be made plain upon the table,
Die
okay?
Wahrheit, die der Herr gesagt hat, klar auf Tafeln gestellt
Because it
werden
clearly
soll.
showed, therefore, that this institution that has the name is not founded on this truth anymore.
Es
Okay?
zeigte klar, dass diese Institution, die den Namen trägt, ist nicht mehr auf diese Wahrheit gegründet.
So, just because they disfellowshipped me and took away my baptism certificate, okay,
Nur weil sie mich
So wie
rausgeschmissen haben, meine Taufzertifikat, also ja, für nichtig jetzt gehalten haben,
am I not a Seventh-day Adventist in
Wenn ich
God's
jetzt-
eyes anymore?
nicht mehr ein Siebentags-Adventist in Gottes Augen,
Yeah. Even though I still believe these truths?
obwohl ich diese Wahrheiten noch glaube.
Oh, yeah.
Nein.
I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, okay?
Ich bin ein
Because
Siebentags-Adventist.
these truths makes me a Seventh-day
Das
Adventist.
sind diese Wahrheiten, die mir ein Siebentags-Adventist ausmachen.
And this is the important thing that we need to understand.
Und das
Okay?
ist das Wichtige, was wir verstehen müssen.
Okay.
Lawrence,
Mhm.
just for clarity, isn't it so that the church declares itself as a movement? I mean,
The conference church, you mean?
yes.
Could be, I don't know.
How do they do that?
Ja, wie?
What's that?
No, I don't know where this is coming from, but in my mind, it's stored that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not a church but a movement.
No, I don't think so. They're definitely registered.
Bevor 1863,
Yeah.
also vor 1863.
Not after that.
1863 sind sie eine organisierte.
They went from a movement to
I mean, of course, it's an organized church as
But
such,
it's registered
Yeah.
as a
as a church.
Sie sind eine offizielle Gemeinde 1863 geworden.
Okay. Then, okay.
Davor war es der Millerite-Bewegung.
yes, see for instance in Germany, it's different than here. Here they're under a certain number, and therefore Austria doesn't recognize them in that category, but in Germany they do so, and worldwide they do, but it's just here in Austria they're under a certain number, so they don't recognize them
Yeah.
as a church.
Okay.
Just for the clarity, because we talked about this, that it will be a movement at the end of days and so on.
Yeah, I mean, there will be a counterfeit movement also, right?
Also es wird eine falsche Bewegung geben auch.
In this quote that we read, that Satan seeks to make a reformation
Dieses
among
Zitat,
them,
die wir gelesen haben, wo Satan sucht, eine Reformation zu erschaffen.
that's in perfect sense applies to this when you become the light bearer, right?
Im perfekten Sinne, das wäre, wenn du Lichtträger geworden bist.
And
Also
God
wenn
raises up this movement, this mighty movement, and many of them will apostatize again, you know.
Gott diese mächtige Bewegung aufstellt, viele von denen werden wieder wegfallen.
But you see the same principle, you see the same principle now applied to this conference church, okay?
Dasselbe Prinzip können wir sehen, diesen Konferenzgemeinde anzuwenden.
It's called the Omega
Yes.
apostasy.
Das heißt der Omega-Abfall.
So God is the Alpha,
Gott
and
ist der
Omega,
Alpha und der
the
Omega.
beginning,
Das Anfang und das Ende.
the first
Der Erste
and the
und
last.
der Letzte.
So it's those that had the first birth, the beginning, you know, they had this first outpouring of the Spirit, they go forward and they apostatize like Satan
So
did.
ist
They
diejenigen,
become
die die
the
erste
Omega
Geburt
apostasy.
gehabt haben, die gehen voran und dann fallen sie weg wie Satan. Das ist der Omega-Abfall.
Exactly. Okay, so those things that we can see now among the conference churches is just small things compared to the apostasy that will take in this mighty movement that will
Diese
come.
Dinge, die wir
Okay.
sehen können in den
Conference churches.
Konferenzgemeinde, ist nur Kleinigkeiten gegenüber den Dingen, die wir sehen werden unter diesen mächtigen Bewegungen, die denn abfallen
I
werden.
mean, we saw already inside this movement now,
So, wir haben bereits innerhalb von diesen Bewegungen schon gesehen,
the apostasies that already took place,
so,
right?
die wegfallen, die bereits
Paminda, for
stattgefunden haben.
instance, he said, yeah, God is a liar, and
Paminda hat gesagt, Gott ist ein Lügner.
They need
all
to
these
come to a
things.
head though, all this
Yes.
needs to come to a conclusion.
okay, so therefore it will only grow more and more terrible.
So, deswegen, es wird nur zunehmen an Schrecklichkeit.
Okay, so, but at the same time, where the true church is, it will only grow more and more wonderful. Okay.
Aber zur selben Zeit, da wo die wahre Gemeinde ist, es wird nur umso schöner wachsen.
Okay. So now let's go to this next heading.
Gehen wir zu dieser nächsten Überschrift.
What makes the church Babylon?
Und was macht eine Gemeinde Babylon?
It says how Satan would exalt to have a message go broadcast that the only people whom God has made the repositories of his law are the ones to whom this message applies. Referring to Babylon, okay?
Über Babylon spricht es.
The wine of Babylon is the exalting of the false and spurious Sabbath above the Sabbath which the Lord Jehovah hath blessed and sanctified for the use of man. Also it is the immortality of the soul. So, what is the wine of Babylon?
So, was ist das Wein Babylons?
What does she say here?
Was sagt sie hier?
These two doctrines, these two false pillars.
Yes, so the Sunday sacredness and immortality of the soul.
Die Sonntagsheiligkeiten und der Unsterblichkeit der Seele.
And then she says, these kindred heresies and the rejection of the truth convert the church into Babylon. Kings, merchants, rulers, and religious teachers are all in corrupt harmony. So you must accept Sunday, the immortality of the soul,
Du musst Sonntage annehmen und die Unsterblichkeit der Seele akzeptieren
and reject the truth.
und
Okay?
die Wahrheit ablehnen.
Then you become Babylon. Okay?
Dann wirst du Babylon.
So therefore, even though the conference church is clearly in apostasy,
So,
okay,
deswegen, selbst wo die Konferenzgemeinde so offensichtlich in Abfall gerade befindet,
it's not Babylon yet.
das
Okay?
ist noch nicht Babylon.
Okay, because they have not yet accepted Sunday. Okay.
Sie haben noch nicht Sonntage akzeptiert.
Okay.
Or that it
Yes.
says, and rejection of the truth,
Yes.
the exceeding bright light will come to them when
Yes.
they reject that, they're Babylon.
Also
Exactly.
wenn der äußerst helles Licht zu sie kommt und sie das verwerfen, dann werden sie Babylon werden.
But we already read in this other quote in Spalding again, okay,
Wir haben auch bereits in SPM gelesen,
that the nominal Adventists, they will accept the Sunday, right?
dass die Namensadventisten Sonntage annehmen
And
werden.
they will persecute those obscure saints, okay?
Und sie werden diesen verborgenen Heiligen verfolgen.
Okay, so and therefore we can see basically that at the moment they're not yet Babylon, but they will become Babylon. Okay,
Deswegen können wir sehen, im Moment, sie sind noch nicht Babylon, aber sie werden Babylon werden.
and that's why, and this is something that many Adventists use, right? They say, yeah, you should not call the church Babylon.
Und
Okay,
das ist eine Sache, die viele Adventisten benutzen. Du sollst die Gemeinde nicht Babylon nennen.
okay, but they misapply to what it refers to. Okay,
Aber sie verwenden das falsch an zu dem, was es wirklich gehört.
they apply to this institution and not to the people that hold the truth.
Sie
Okay,
wenden es den Institutionen an und nicht diejenigen, die die Wahrheit tragen.
so the people that hold the truth, they never become Babylon. Okay,
Diejenigen, die die Wahrheit tragen, werden nie Babylon,
because they keep the commandments of God.
weil
Right?
sie die Gebote Gottes halten.
Okay, but this institution
Aber diese Institution
will eventually accept Sunday and reject the truth. Okay,
wird letztendlich Sonntage annehmen und die Wahrheit verwerfen.
and they will become Babylon through
Und
this.
sie werden
Okay.
Babylon werden.
Okay, so and that's important that we understand it because many people will lose their salvation because of this false principle.
Und
They
es
hold.
ist wichtig, dass wir das verstehen, denn viele Menschen werden ihre Erlösung verlieren wegen diesem falschen Konzept.
Okay, so next quote,
Nächster Zitat.
and then we just read last few quotes and then we close for this evening.
Wenn wir noch ein paar Zitaten lesen, dann machen wir Schluss.
Just bold-faced.
Nur das Fettgedruckte.
Again I say, the Lord hath not spoken by any messenger who calls the church that keeps the commandments of God Babylon. Okay, so who is his church?
Wer ist seine Gemeinde?
That keeps the commandments.
Diejenigen,
Okay.
die die Gebote einhalten.
So if the conference church would accept Sunday,
Also wenn die Konferenzgemeinde Sonntag annehmen würden,
do they keep God's commandments?
halten sie Gottes Gebote an?
No.
Nein.
Therefore they become Babylon.
Deswegen
Okay.
werden sie Babylon.
Okay, so it's very simple.
Sehr einfach.
So now let's go to this next heading, the General Conference.
So gehen wir zu dieser nächsten Überschrift, der Generalkonferenz.
Just to show that even in this white time, the General Conference already apostatized.
Nur um zu zeigen, dass bereits in Ellen Whites Zeit die Generalkonferenz sind abgefallen.
And that was not the voice of God anymore.
Es ist nicht mehr die Stimme Gottes war.
So even obviously today it's not the voice of God. It's the voice of a new institution. Okay,
Heute ist es
new
nicht die
organization.
Stimme Gottes, sondern es ist die Stimme eines neues Organisations.
It says here, the showing by the past leadership of the conference is not after God's order. Okay? There has been a work done of a character that has not been approved of God. The result we have before us in the ruins where once stood that large printing plant with its expensive facilities. The divine statutes have been set aside. The time will soon come when God will vindicate his insulted authority. The Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. And the earth shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. But who may abide the day of his coming, and who shall stand when he appeareth? So they set aside the law of God, she says here. Right?
Sie legen das Gesetz Gottes beiseite.
In the work of God, no kingly authority is to be exercised by any human being, or by 2 or 3. The representatives of the conference, as it has been carried with authority for the last 20 years, shall be no longer justified in saying, the temple of the Lord are we. The men in positions of trust have not been carrying the work wisely. So here she clearly says they were no longer the temple of the Lord. Right?
Hier seid sie klar, dass sie nicht mehr den Tempel des Herrn waren.
Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
The Lord calls for wise men to preside over his work, and to be faithful shepherds of his flock. He has a work to be done in every city. The general conference has fallen into strange ways, and we have reason to marvel that judgment has not fallen, showing by terrible things in righteousness that God is not a man that he should lie. Okay, so they went into strange ways,
Sie
right?
sind auf fremden Wege gegangen.
Therefore they left the appointed way of the Lord.
Deswegen sie haben den bestimmten Weg des Herrn verlassen.
And the only reason why the Lord did not punish them immediately is because God is not a man, right?
Und der einzige Grund, weshalb Gott sie nicht sofort bestraft hatte, weil es hier sagt, dass Gott nicht ein Mann ist.
Okay, let's read the next quote and then we can close for this evening.
Lesen wir den nächsten Zitat, dann machen wir Schluss.
Or maybe one more quote after this.
Oder sogar 2 Zitate.
It says, "All my very soul is drawn out in these things. Men who have not learned to submit themselves to the control and discipline of God are not competent to train their youth, to deal with human minds. It is just as much an impossibility for them to do this work as it would be for them to make a world. That these men should stand in sacred place, to be as the voice of God to the people, as we once believed the General Conference to be, that is past. What we want now is a reorganization. We want to begin at the foundation and to build upon a different principle." Okay, so here she says the General Conference is no longer the voice of God. Yes?
Das heißt, der Generalkonferenz ist nicht mehr die Stimme Gottes.
Okay. So, next quote and last quote for this evening.
So, nächster und letzter Zitat für heute.
Here she now compares the Jews from the first coming of Christ with the Adventists at the second coming of Christ.
So,
Okay.
hier vergleicht sie den Juden bei den ersten Ankunft Christi mit den Adventisten bei seinen zweiten Ankunft.
It says there's the deplorable lack of spirituality among our people. A great work must be done for them before they become what Christ designed them they should be, the light of the world. For years I have felt deep anguish of soul as the Lord has presented before me the want in our churches of Jesus and his love. There has been a spirit of self-sufficiency and a disposition to strive for position and supremacy. So what is among God's people?
So, was ist unter Gottes Volk?
Seeking for supremacy.
Yes.
Streben für Herrschaft
And also self-sufficiency, right?
und Selbstgenügsamkeit.
I have seen that self-glorification was becoming common among Seventh-day Adventists, And that unless the pride of man should be abased and Christ exalted, we should, as a people, be in no better condition to receive Christ at his second advent than were the Jewish people to receive him at his first advent. Okay, and can we see that among Adventism, the pride of man was abased?
So können wir sehen unter den Adventismus, dass der Stolz des Menschen erniedrigt wird
In any recent decade?
so in den letzten Jahrzehnten?
No, right?
Nein.
Yeah. So therefore the same spirit is still among Adventism, right?
Deswegen derselbe Geist ist immer noch unter den Adventismus reif.
And therefore what can we therefore know from this?
Was können wir davon ziehen?
That the condition of Adventism is not better than the condition of the Jews at the first advent of Christ,
Der
right?
Zustand im Adventismus ist nicht besser als den Zustand den Juden zum Christi erste Ankunft.
Okay, in what alone can abase our pride?
Und was ist es allein, was unsere Stolz erniedrigen kann?
The revelation.
Das ist die
Okay.
Offenbarung.
Okay, so in all of Adventism doesn't understand this doctrine about the revelation anymore,
Und
right?
der ganze Adventismus versteht diese Lehre über die Offenbarung zurzeit nicht.
So therefore it's impossible that the pride could be abated.
So,
Right?
deswegen ist es unmöglich, dass den Stolz erniedrigt werden
And
konnte.
that's why we are in this terrible condition, just like the Jews were when Christ came the first time.
Und deswegen sind wir in diesem schrecklichen Zustand, genauso wie die Juden bei Christi erster Ankunft.
Yes. And Satan, he has Adventism under full control. Okay.
Satan hat den Adventismus unter seine volle Kontrolle.
Except this little movement that the Lord wants to now raise up to obtain this birth again experience. Okay.
Außer diese kleine Bewegung, die der Herr aufrichten will, um diese Neugeburtserfahrung zu erhalten.
Okay. So we don't want to exalt ourselves here because we're just as bad as everybody else. Okay.
Also wir wollen uns hier nicht erheben, weil wir sind genauso schlimm wie alle anderen.
We also have in our midst pride and self-sufficiency and seeking for supremacy.
Also wir haben auch mitten unter uns Stolz und Selbstgenugsamkeit und das Streben für Herrschaft.
Yes. But we at least study and we know the solution, right?
Aber zumindest studieren wir und wir wissen die Lösung.
Okay, and we know we already got laid out by the Lord how we can obtain the solution. Okay.
Und wir haben es bereits dargelegt bekommen vom Herrn, wie wir diese Lösung erhalten können.
Okay. And therefore, if we hold on by faith to the end, then the Lord will have a people.
Und
Okay.
deswegen, wenn wir durch Glaube bis zum Ende festhalten, dann wird der Herr ein Volk haben.
And then you can create this mighty movement. Okay.
Er kann diese mächtige Bewegung kreieren.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. So I hope that this topic about what is the church has become a little bit clearer.
Ich hoffe, dass diese Thema, was die Gemeinde ist, etwas klarer geworden ist.
And I don't know, maybe we will continue with another presentation, maybe not. I cannot tell. Okay. At the moment. Maybe we will continue with a further presentation on this topic.
Und vielleicht werden wir eine weitere Vortrag über diesen Thema halten.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Vielleicht nicht.
We'll see.
Wir
Okay.
werden sehen.
Okay. Let's close.
Lass uns Schluss machen.